Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Animal Wellness Podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Joseph Grove. On this show, we talk about animals and the people who care about them, and also have the power to improve their lives by influencing laws, regulations, and culture accordingly. On the show today, we have two people with us. Julie Marshall, she is our National Communications Director, 30 years of experience in journalism, and also wrote the book, Making Burros Fly, Cleveland, Amory, and the Animal Rescue Pioneer. So Julie, always glad to have you with us. Ursula Goodenough is our special guest. She is professor of biology emerita at Washington University in St. Louis, where she engaged in research on eukaryotic, did I pronounce that right, Ursula?
Almost, eukaryotic.
Eukaryotic algae, thank you. She authored the textbook Genetics and presented the paradigm of the religious naturalist orientation and the epic of evolution in numerous venues around the world. She currently serves as president of the Religious Naturalist Association. We're talking to her because another one of her books, The Sacred Depths of Nature, How Life Has Emerged and Evolved, first published in 1998, is out with a new edition. So Ursula, Julie, glad to have you both on the show.
Great to be here.
Yeah. And Julie, I've got to tell you, I'm glad Wayne's not on the show. I'm glad Wayne is not on the show because I have a feeling this show could go off the rails pretty easily, because we'll be talking about some really interesting things, and they may not be so myopically focused on animals the way Wayne likes to do it. Ursula writes about things that are just tremendously fascinating to me. I employ them in other areas of my life as well. So don't tell Wayne we've done this show, Julie. Mum's the word. Mum's the word.
Maybe he'll learn from it. Maybe he'll learn that there are critters besides animals that are important.
Well, right.
Like the food they eat.
Well, no. And I do have a tendency to run far afield, and Wayne is very disciplined, as he should be, right? Because this is the Animal Wellness Podcast. It's not what's Joe thinking about today. That's not the name of the show. So, and I tell you one reason this topic appeals to me, and I've shorthanded it this way before by describing a conversation I have with, I'm going to call him, without any hint of pejorative, a fundamentalist Christian, right? We were talking about animals. Julie, I think this came up in the show you and I did before.
Yeah.
But I quoted this man as saying, God gave us animals to do what we want with. And that, to me, telescoped so well what I perceive to be the abuse of this go forth and exercise dominion over the world, right? This almost hostile perspective Western religion has against nature. So when I saw what you were about, Ursula, I really wanted to have you on the show. So let me start us off this way. You describe yourself, or you describe this perspective, yours, as religious naturalism. If that's accurate, tell us what that means.
Well, I try to avoid the ism. I try to say religious naturalist orientation, but that's a lot clumsier. So, but it isn't an ism. It's an orientation, more like we think of the word in public usage, as taking everybody's story, our understandings of how life emerged and evolved, and developing religious responses to them. And by religious, I talk of three different kinds. I talk about interpretive responses. What does this story tell me about the meaning of life, about death, about why there's anything at all rather than nothing? A sort of philosophical tangent. The spiritual, which is how does the story make me feel? Awareness, reverence, gratitude, those kinds of things. And then the moral, how does this story help me be a better person, both to other humans and to the planetary matrix and all its critters. So religious naturalist takes the story, has religious responses to them, and is so oriented, and if so oriented, is a member of our little association.
Yeah, that's like the definition of the religious quest, right? Those three prongs.
That's how I see it. I see that goes on in all the traditions. The traditions have a story: the Old Testament, the New Testament, the writings of the Buddha, etc. And then in the same way, those three questions are asked of the story.
And this probably is where we'll get more divergent than other parts, because I do want to ask, relative to animal wellness action, why then should people give a damn about animals, right? I mean, you would think everyone would care about animals, and most people love animals. But when most people say they love animals, they love dogs, they love cats, they may love horses. They don't necessarily think of their love for pigs when they're ordering bacon, unaware of how that meat maybe came to their plate, whether it was done so humanely. But let's before we get to that though, because in my own personal quest, I find that the more naturalist I become, the less religious I feel I can be. Is though understanding a lot of the machinery, is understanding a lot of the machinery as you outlined so well in your book, right? I mean, this is a fascinating little book.
Didn't my book also lift up ways that they could enhance and bless your spiritual life?
Well, and that's what I want you to.
That's what I'm trying to. That's the point of the book. So if I failed, let me know.
Well, I'm a tough nut, Ursula, right? But I want to ask that question for the benefit of listeners so they can get an understanding of how you do approach that, because it seems to be the case that the more science enters, the more religion leaves. You don't find it to be that way.
Exactly.
In fact, preferably not that way. How do you connect the two? That's my question for you.
Well, I mean, if you define religion as, the Western monotheisms or, a lot of other ones, then yeah, some of the stuff that's in everybody's story isn't in the Bible, and some of it goes against what you've been taught in Sunday school. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other perspectives that can be called religious.
Oh, can I bring in a story? Since I love how you weave narrative and story in your book, and the importance of that in human culture. I was thinking a lot. You made me think a lot about wolves. And here in Colorado, we're about to reintroduce them, and we have this fiery debate about. We have the management side and the sport hunting side that say we must sport hunt them because we have to, from a science-based perspective, manage their populations in order to have more elk for people to hunt, and so also for livestock. But then there's the animal wellness advocates like ourselves, and we also have larger nationwide campaigns to protect wolves and end sport hunting that say leave them alone, they can manage themselves, right? So these are largely the first prong of the three in the religious quest. So that's the science-based model. And then if we try to engage like our politicians and wildlife agencies in the second prong of the feelings of animals and how it makes us feel when we treat them so cruelly, it's like they can't even speak that language. No, we don't go there. We're on another planet. And then if we try to go to the third prong with the eco-morals of looking at this from a perspective of the earth and our relationship with the earth and animals, we get into what Joseph was talking about, is the prevailing myth and story of dominance and use and take. So I feel like your book empowered me to see that I am religious because I have reverence and awe, and your book also empowered me that it's never too late to do anything. But where I'm super stuck is, how do we change this culture where the people in power and control tell us they don't speak our language?
It's the same question in lots of other political arenas, right? It's not just this issue. There's a general group of us that are really sort of trying to figure it out and get it right. And there are people who are very rigid for financial reasons or for religious reasons or political reasons. And it's not a new conversation. It's been going on for millennia, maybe in different ways of trying to get it better, get it more right, understand reality better, understand how to ask questions and how to teach one another what we've learned. And it's very difficult to not feel impatient. And, why didn't that last conference yield the results that we wanted it to yield? Everyone was so fixed in their ways. You just, as Martin Luther King says, the fierce urgency of now. You just got to keep doing it.
Yeah, Julie referred to eco-morality, and that is one of the core themes or one of the core presences in your book. It's relatively self-explanatory, I suppose, by the word itself. What do you mean by eco-morality?
Well, the first part of chapter 13 discusses morality, which is usually used to talk about human interactions and thou shalt and thou shalt nots. And so I discussed that for a while, and lift up the fact that these tendencies come with us at birth, because we are social animals. We come from a social lineage. It's not like we have to learn on clay tablet that you're not supposed to kill each other. We already know that. And that those same kinds of pro-social sensibilities that we have and that are nurtured by philosophers and by teachers and so on are readily expanded to the earth as a whole. Acknowledging our own critterhood, acknowledging the fact that we need to find a place within the planetary matrix that is sustaining and kind and joyous.
And that goes to the planetary ethic. You talk about some in the first part of your book, correct?
So the planetary ethic is just sort of an extension of that. If everybody felt that way, then there would be a planetary ethic, right? So it's obviously another very large leap forward. The first horizon is to help people get in touch with and celebrate and develop their eco-morality.
Part of your book that to me as an animal advocate really stands out is where you talk about the machinery that gives us consciousness being present in every animal, at least mammals and birds and reptiles, right? That it's all there.
I think that snails are conscious. I mean, I use the term conscious to depict any critter with a brain, and critters with brains we call animals. So critters with brains include snails and worms. And that I mean, since consciousness is used in so many hundred different ways, I decided to pick one. And the one I picked is that consciousness is something that brains do, that animals do. And so all animals are conscious. And so therefore, while we're conscious of different things, a snail is clearly conscious of different things than a worm, and a worm is conscious of different things than a fly. They're conscious of what they need to find in their environment for food and shelter. But the basic way that it's set up is the same in all animals and evolved from the same original source.
No, very good. No, I appreciate that, because you're right. Consciousness, in particularly if you put it on a column against sentience, self-awareness, it does become quite the potpourri of perspectives.
All of those terms are, to my mind, don't have a single meaning, and therefore, but they're good words. They mean things. So I think it's really important that we just say, okay, this is what I mean by conscious, and take it from there. Hear what I have to say about it.
Yeah, I'm going to butcher Jeremy Bentham's quote, but I believe it was he who said, it's not whether they can speak, it's not whether they can reason, it's whether they can suffer. Did I say that right, Ursula? You're probably familiar with the quote.
Okay. So suffering. Do you want to go to suffering? I have some thoughts on suffering, but
well, for me, I would like to do that, because for me, that is the commonality I use to establish, or to at least, I guess it's the predicate of my establishment of the need to protect animals. It is to prevent suffering. So yeah, go there.
Well, certainly suffering that is imposed is to be prevented. Okay, so I call that cruelty. That an animal, a being of any sort, is made to suffer, made to feel pain if they are pain-feeling creatures. But I see suffering as a much more universal thing that all critters go through, whether they have brains, whether they have consciousness. It's a signal that things aren't right and that it's time to fix it. And it's, in that sense, it's a positive. It gives you information that things are awry and that it's time to pay attention and get the suffering to go away. Now, that's the usual cycle in an animal's life, is that there's not enough sugar, they're suffering because they're feeling weak, they get the sugar and they stop suffering. So suffering is everywhere. Plants, when you pull off their leaves or, cut their stem, there's a form of suffering there. They start healing, they start making new tissue. So what I think you guys are so good at is identifying suffering that has been imposed on animals, basically by humans, right? I mean, you're not real concerned about the fact that a hawk catches a fish, right? Because that's what hawks do. And the fish suffers while he's, hanging, in the hawk's talons and getting its head bit off. I mean, it's not fun. But that's different from just, laying waste to large populations of animals or putting them in cages or doing the kind of stuff we do.
Yeah, going out and actively
Yeah,
doing
it's different,
harm.
And I mean, I don't eat red meat, but I do eat fowl, I eat fish. That's my choice. I'm not defending it or not, but those who eat plants are also killing organisms that are connected to us. We all share a common ancestor.
And so, Joseph, you asked the question about suffering in the context of eco-morality, right? Is that right? Because
what I heard Joe say is that what drives him is his outrage about suffering, and I just countered by saying, sure, I'm all about feeling outrage about suffering when it's imposed, but
when it's imposed,
as a biologist, I had to notice that suffering is an adaptive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I come back to what we were talking about in the beginning about the problem of human culture and how we do impose that and teach that in our kids. I was just talking to a trapper yesterday who's one of the most I admire him so much. He's an advocate against trapping, but he grew up in a culture where he told a story of he and his other boys had trapped animals, and they were like laughing at them when one was trying to chew its leg off. I don't remember what animal it was, but like he's like, how in the world did we how did we think that was okay? It was just the culture they grew up in, and they didn't even think this animal felt anything. They're like, why? They thought it was funny he was trying to chew his leg off. Like this, there's still people that grow up in that culture, and it's just the way they are, and then some change and some don't. And I guess I wanted to ask you to repeat that quote from Martin Luther King again, because that was so good, so I can write it down. About
Julie, the essence of a podcast is that it's recorded and you could listen to it again. You don't have to write this stuff down, Julie.
Never.
You can find it on the internet.
I think it's in my book, The Fierce Urgency of Now.
Yeah. I'm so into this, I lost where I was.
Okay.
Julie, do you want me to get a little pen and paper and sketch what we all look like too, so you can have that?
But if human culture is the problem, and like your friend who thinks we can dominate, or boys that grow up this way. It's like the solution, like in your book, when you talk about the people who learn about the bonobo that help the bird, like maybe it's stories like these that we need more of, or maybe I think
and they're all over the place. I mean, there's the Discovery Channel, there's Earth Day, there's a big environmental movement out there. I mean, most of the Protestant and Catholic churches and Jewish churches that I know all have greening committees and going out and working in the communities and rescues and all sorts of stuff going on. It's not all like that kid that laughed at the trap anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, my grandsons would no more laugh at an animal trap than they would kill themselves. No way. So, I mean, Julie, you said something about the problem was human culture. I mean, the problem is we've got so many cultures, right? And we have to pick good ones. We have to pick sustainable ones. We have to pick ones that respect all critters, that respect our story of how we got here. To my mind, it makes one very humble and much less aggressive.
Yeah, and this is something I get into also probably to Wayne's, chagrin, and that is the component, of course, of culture. The United States has more lawyers per capita than any other country on earth, and many people would ascribe that fact to perhaps our avarice, to our risability in terms of facing challenges, but it goes back, I think, ultimately to the fact that we are a melting pot culture. And when you take various cultures and put them side by side, they don't have that common understanding of how the world works, such that disagreements can be sorted out naturally and without animus. And I think when you talk about, cultures and how they play a role in inculcating perhaps a compassionate perspective toward the earth, toward the animals, I don't know if I'm optimistic, for the United States, because not only do we retain a potpourri. Is that the second time I've used potpourri in this podcast? Julie, remind me that's the first time. Okay. Because I have a limit of one. I limit myself to one. But we have this plethora of cultures. We seem to be ever more divisive. The overarching culture, good or bad, that may have been represented by the Christian church writ large earlier on, is gone. We can't even agree on what men and women are anymore without some tension. How are we going to get people to look around us and say, hey, maybe I don't need to shoot that animal, or maybe I don't need to go to a cockfight or a dog fight?
Joe, you don't have to imagine there are millions of people in the United States who are so sensitive. It's not hundreds of millions, but it's millions, and it's growing, and it's being taught in the schools. My third grade grandson just had a huge unit on whales, and they all sorts of paper mache whales, and which ones were endangered and which ones were being protected, and it just went on and on and on. That's
good to talk to you about.
It's a glass half full situation to my mind, not half empty. I don't think we're going backwards on this.
That's why I like to have Julie on the show, because I am definitely a glass half empty person. Julie's glass is always flowing over. Okay, it's not only full, it's over on the table. Go ahead, Julie.
It's true, and what you're making me realize is where you sit in the world and the people you're with, it's very nurturing, and day to day, 24/7, we are immersed, Joe and I, in the ugly stories and reacting and trying to change. And I think maybe sometimes we just forget, it's so helpful to talk to you and read your book, just we all need to be energized and to remember there's so many good people doing this work. But I think sometimes it gets demoralizing when you're just really attuned day in, day out to the horrors out there and the callousness, and then I love I love the idea of like for us to reach out to spiritual groups in our communities and forge relationships and like.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, if they're protecting local wildlife because the local wildlife is God's creation, or if they're doing it because they're religious naturalists, or because there's a spirit that's inside those animals from their indigenous traditions, to my mind, it doesn't matter, as long as we have the same goal, which is to help those animals to find peaceful and flourishing existence. The religious naturalist orientation seems to, well, clearly is highly received, well received by persons who have, you know, quote, lost their faith, who don't, and we know from the Pew surveys that there are more and more such people coming. But I don't think the answer is to be not religious or to be spiritual but not religious. I think that being religious, I'm going to go for the term, it means getting together, it means ligating, it means ligament, it means sharing core understandings.
Mm-hmm. And you distinguish between being religious, if I'm correct in my reading, and being spiritualistic, with religion having a shared mythos or story. Did I read you correct on that?
Well, almost. I mean, it's so I see religion as the umbrella, the tent. That's the name for this particular orientation, one's life, one's religious orientation. And within that religious orientation, there are these three avenues: the interpretive, the spiritual, and the moral. And so they collaborate, they come together, they reinforce one another to generate an emergent orientation, which I'm calling a religious naturalist orientation. But it has spiritual within it. It's not an either or. It's not, I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. If you're spiritual only, I think you're missing out in your vocabulary in this whole other part. The biggest one always has been the moral part. I mean, the religious histories of all cultures throughout the ages, you know, no matter what, there was this overwhelming idea of, a philosopher friend of mine says, educating the social emotions. We come with these social emotions, and how are they educated? How do they orient one's behavior with others and with the rest of the world?
Yeah, and our kids today, they're so like isolated and not in nature and on their social media, and we're just honoring a man here in Boulder, Oakthorn, who grew up on 80 acres and spent his childhood in nature and built this beautiful environmental education center in Boulder. And he does these bird banding programs. My daughter's in them, and I just love him. And I just think of what he's accomplished is amazing. And then I think of what we're struggling with to get our kids out in nature and away from their isolation. And that's like a really important thing, right? I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, get out. You can push them outside. I mean, obviously that's not possible if you live on the 45th floor in a tenement in the Bronx. Okay, so let's go. There are situations where that is challenging, but you know, you can learn a lot about nature from some plants that your mother has put on the window, from your pet dog, from, you know, and all schools, no matter what, have trips out into nature. And once hopefully the kid I have in mind, she goes to high school, there are field trips, there's science courses, you know, it develops. And the fact that there are these kids that are trapped without nature, either by their social circumstances, their living circumstances, or by the fact that they're addicted to their screens, you know, that doesn't necessarily have to be a life sentence. It can be there. I mean, I have two grandsons who live here next door, and they love their screens, but you know, the minute we get them outside, then they're romping around like little rabbits.
Yeah.
You have a great quote from Mr. Einstein in your book, and when I read it, it really resonated with me, because I feel maybe he could be talking about me in some of this. The quote you provide is, "He who can no longer wonder and stand wrapped in awe is as good as dead." And I think the journey of my own life has been so reductionist that I am missing that sense of wonder and awe you talk about. And it's a struggle for me to get there, because when I hear you talk about spirituality, my mind translates that into, and you're going to correct me, I'm sure, and I hope you will, because when I hear that, I think of something that exists beyond the material world, right? Even beyond conscious thought, that there is some sort of, not old man in the sky,
let me
but
help you with the etymology. I do in the book. Spirit means essence, means breath. It is a very natural, gas. It suggests sort of the gasp that one feels when one is presented with awe and wonder, be it a mountain or an ocean or a nursing antelope. But it's the same, and I think that that's the origin of spiritual. Of course, people have, because it doesn't feel material. That's the trick. It feels like if you said, "Oh, I'm having this experience and it's coming from the outside," whatever that means, then you get into the whole part that you're having trouble with. But it doesn't have to. You don't have to use the word that way.
yeah. So I was driving through a subdivision the other day. Julie, I'll go to you in a second. I want you to weigh in on this. But there were a couple of deer really close to the road where I wouldn't normally have expected to see deer. And it was mesmerizing. I was taken out of myself for a moment and just caught up in the fact that I was sharing this relatively confined bit of geography with them. Is that spiritual? Did I have a spiritual experience?
Yeah.
All right. Good. Julie,
Okay.
there may be hope for me yet.
So
Julie.
there was
may be hope.
awe, right? There was awe. There was reverence. You were revering these animals. There was gratitude that you had the experience, that you could share life with them. There was joy. There was all sorts of inner stuff. Love, let's go there, for these animals. Those are spiritual experiences, Joe. I'm sorry you're not a curmudgeon anymore.
This is therapy.
Yeah. Normally, Ursula, we charge $500 for people to come onto the show, but I'm going to waive the cost for you. There's no charge for doing this show.
I'm going to charge you $1,000 for the therapy session.
No kidding. Going back to this whole notion of screen addiction and all of that, I don't think that's another good sign, because I do think having the experience of being with animals and being able to impute to all animals the worthiness of those which may be our favorite is key to the kind of compassion that we want to see. There's a great book I read a long time ago called Lost Connections by Johann Hari. And it goes into how much of modern malaise, our depression, our anxiety, all of our health issues can really be tied not directly to the absence or a low serotonin level, but just the fact that we've moved away from nature, from a sense of community, from being in touch with others. And I think that outside of zoos, I don't think you can get this at a zoo, but getting these kids out with the animals so that they can have kind of the experience I did with those deer is key. So not so much a question as a pontification, so forgive me for that. I want to tie us back to the animals. Ursula, you talk about 4 virtues in your book, okay? Compassion, fair-mindedness, reverence, and courage. Could you apply those to how our listeners can approach animals with them?
I mean, I parse it out in the book into eco-compassion, eco-fairness. So that's making it as large as it can be, because that includes plants, that includes mountains, that includes everything. If you just want to focus on animals, though, it's really easy because we're animals, they're animals. We have social animal instincts. We have symbolic language in science, so we understand that we're very close cousins to all these beings. And, we're just one of millions of different species. We just showed up. There's no reason why we have to become and should be the dominant creatures, and things have to be fair.
Right. Julie, I'll turn it to you for a final question. I just want to appreciate for a moment everything Ursula said. And I think fair-mindedness to me, is the key one, because that to me denudes exceptionalism of its more poisonous aspects. Because when I started to say that whatever that animal is 100% of it, just like whatever I am 100% of me. And whatever bothers me to the max, there's a corollary inside that animal where it is maximally afraid or hurt. And that just because we may not experience things the same way, we are experiencing the same things. So fair-mindedness among those virtues really stuck out. And courage too, right? We so many people I talk to, I get it. I'm never invited to a lot of dinner parties because I will invariably end up on discussions, and I go too far, but just kind of indicating to people what really goes on with animals. And our followers, our listeners, our subscribers know, of many of them. But when you educate people, I think they're confronted with fear versus courage in some way, right? Because they know that if they hear it and if they nest that understanding within their own consciousness, they have to do something about it. So it's easier not to think about it than to confront the potential courageous action that may be needed to remedy the thing about which they're thinking. More pontificating. All right. Okay. Julie, I'll go to you for a final question.
My last question was, I would love to hear your Earth Day message.
Earth Day should be a day where you really are thinking about how lucky you are to be alive at all.
No, yes. Good point. I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and on Earth Day, we are having what they bill, perhaps without hyperbole, as the largest fireworks show on the planet. So on Earth Day, our city will be launching tons of explosives into the air, terrifying animals, probably killing fish, sending gunpowder smoke. So no good Earth Day in Louisville, but by golly, it's Derby time.
Okay,
so we have to
have the courage to form a committee to go to the mayor to present your case and to say that you think that Earth Day should be celebrated in other ways.
Yeah. I'm going to bring Julie down and tie her to the barge from which they launch the fireworks and defy them to launch. Julie, I'll see you Saturday. Yeah, I'll see you Saturday, Julie. We're going to tie you to the barge. So
sorry, I got plans.
Plans. All right. Well, we've been talking to Ursula Goodenough. Her book is The Sacred Depths of Nature, the second edition, now out, first launched in 1998. I bet you had to revise a lot of the science since it first came out in 1998.
It wasn't revising so much the science that I picked in 1998. It turned out I had pretty good instincts as to what was going to last and what was going to go away. Some stuff went away and I fixed that, but it was more that it deepened because during 25 years since I wrote the book, I've been talking to a lot of people, a lot more reading, a lot more ways of thinking about how the world works that I had the privilege to put into language in my book.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's a fairly brief book. It's not long, but if you're interested in how the world works, this is a phenomenal book, not only in terms of cosmology, but biology and how it connects. My daughter's a recent biology graduate from Bellarmine University. I'm going to give her this book, and I think she will find in it an enviable concise representation of everything she learned over 4 years. So there you go. I wish I hadn't highlighted it now, because I could have given it to her as a birthday present.
No, buy a new one.
Buy a new one. I like it.
I get $3.
You get $3 of every book. If people want to get the book, they can go to Barnes and Noble, Amazon. I mean, it's everywhere, right? You can order it anywhere. There's Julie. Julie
Just
will
make sure
sell.
you get, there's the first edition has a turtles on it too, but it's blue. This one is orange, so get the orange one.
Thank you, Ursula. Thank you, Julie. I appreciate it. It's been a fun conversation for sure. It absolutely has. And I want to thank you to our listeners. Please do go to animalwellnessaction.org. Sign up for our newsletters. We do a lot of great work. Right now, we just have introduced the Fight Act to combat animal fighting. Huge bill. We have the Add Soy Act that will bring relief to dairy cows and school children. That's very interesting. We're fighting horse slaughter. I referenced the Kentucky Derby. Many of the horses that run on Derby Day will end up in Canada or Mexico, slaughtered for food to go overseas. So we are involved in a lot of stuff. We need your support. Even if you can't donate, we hope you can. You can follow our news and information, and we offer ample opportunities to send letters directly to your representatives, senators, the president, governors, all easy peasy. You just hit a button and your voice will be heard, but only if you sign up for our material at animalwellnessaction.org. This podcast is available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and by golly, we're sure glad you listened to it today. So I've been your host, Joseph Grove, and we'll be back soon with another episode of the Animal Wellness Podcast.